For me, the main element is trying to capture the thing I was going to capture. So, for example, if there was the fog or the Milky Way or whatever, the lightning or the storms, I want that to be the focus of the elements, not just the fact that it's a pretty picture. Because if I don't have that, then there's no difference between me just taking a picture in the middle of the day.
Welcome to episode 54 of the Photo Country podcast, where we explore diverse and inspiring journeys of image makers from all over the world. I'm your host Rajeev, and today we have a very special guest joining us all the way from South Africa. He's a scientist turned landscape photographer whose stunning images capture the raw beauty of Africa's diverse landscapes and wildlife. Please welcome Kyle Goetsch. In this episode, Kyle shares his incredible journey from working in the lab with a PhD in biochemistry to hiking mountains and traversing deserts with his camera. We will dive into his creative process, the challenges and triumphs of landscape photography, and what it takes to capture those breathtaking shots. So stay tuned for an enlightening conversation on capturing the beauty of Africa through Kyle's lenses. I need to mention MagicMind here. They reached out to me some time back to try out their drink. It's the world's first mental performance shot, and they have a 7-day challenge. So basically, I have to try out this drink for 7 days and sort of experience how it impacts my life. And let me tell you, it's been magical. The mission of MagicMind is to make me or people like me more efficient while also allowing me to have a fun, productive day. MagicMind has nootropics, adaptogens, turmeric, and a lot of other natural products, and it's 100% safe. After using it for a week, I can tell you it has definitely made me more efficient and more productive, and the number of coffees I usually drink has drastically gone down. And what I really like about MagicMind is that it's 100% carbon neutral. Right now, you have a limited time offer where you can get up to 48% of your first subscription or 20% of your one-time purchase if you use the code Rajeev20. And they ship internationally up to 65 countries all across the world. You can claim it at magicmind.com/photocountry. I'll put those links in the show notes. So guys, try out MagicMind. Take it from me. It really works. So sit back, relax, and dive into a journey with me across the wilds and landscapes of southern Africa, along with photographer Kyle Goetsch. Thank you, Kyle, for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So bright and early for you.
Yes, it's 7 a.m. and it's been quite the journey for you as well. So tell me a bit about your journey. How did you get started?
Sure, that is a loaded question. I suppose landscape photography is one of those genres where you don't necessarily study it straight out of school and decide that's what I want to be. Most landscape photographers I know started off doing something else and then completely changed into landscape photography, which is pretty similar to my own story. So I have a PhD in biochemistry. I used to work in the lab. I used to do a nine to five job every day and get up and wear button shirts and chinos and do a lot of office and lab work. And now I'm out in the bush and climbing mountains and taking photos. So completely different for me. Yeah. So I left my career doing biochemistry 6 years ago now. Yeah, so it's been a while again. I still get a bit surprised when someone calls me doctor from my past life, and I'm like, oh, who's that guy? I don't recognize him anymore. He doesn't exist anymore. Yeah,
Yes, a Dr. Kyle to photographer Kyle. That's quite
exactly.
a
Yeah.
shift. How did you leave the security of a job that pays you a steady monthly salary to a pretty dynamic world of photography where it's be quite challenging to have pay the bills and have a steady revenue? Like, how did you make that shift?
No, exactly. It's difficult to make that shift. I started doing photography while I was doing my old job, and the job started coming in, and I started doing small workshops and started doing some prints, and I was starting to get some money in. And then the contract that I had where I was working for 2 years was coming to an end, and it didn't look like it was going to get renewed. So it was for me either go and find a job somewhere else or take the plunge and do. something I love doing. So I decided to take the plunge. Yeah.
Your photograph actually did not pop up on Instagram. Interestingly, it was on Facebook. I think it was one of
Okay.
your table mountain shots with the Lion's Rock, if I'm not mistaken. And it was something that you were trying for a long time, and it came together. It
Yes,
was
so the Milky Way over the Lion's Head.
exactly, and that fog as well. So
Yes, yes.
that was the photograph that actually popped up on my Facebook feed, and I was like, "Wow, that's amazing!" And there's quite a number of photographs of that location. Interesting, there's also a Lions Rock in Auckland, which is on a beach called Piha. So
Okay.
it's one of those common things, but it looks amazing. But what's your fascination with that rock? Because it features quite prominently in your feed.
Yeah, look, yeah, in Cape Town, there are quite a few prominent areas. So you'll see a lot of Table Mountain and Lion's Head and a lot of those areas because it's close to me. It's in my backyard, basically. So those are the places where when the weather's good, I'm going to grab my camera and 30 minutes, 20 minutes, I'm up on the mountain taking pictures. So you're going to be seeing a lot more of that just because it's close to me and it's one of those places that, even though you live in a city, you can hike up the mountain, be above the fog, and you feel that you're the only person up on the mountain. So it's quite nice to do that. And I think it's quite nice for the soul as well, just to be out there at those times that people aren't normally out on the mountain and see the things that they don't normally see as well.
And the other thing is, most photography that you tend to see out of Africa is wildlife. I have seen landscape photography, but I haven't seen it like what you showcase. Why? Yeah, why is that?
Yeah, look, I do a little bit of wildlife. I enjoy wildlife. I think if you live in Africa and you're a photographer, I think you're always going to be drawn to the wildlife just because it's so prominent and it's just so beautiful. Yeah. But for me, you see a headshot of a lion, you see a headshot of an elephant. They're a dime a dozen now. There's so many photographers coming and doing that. And for me, the challenge is to combine my passion of landscape photography with the rest of the nature and to try and show places that people have maybe been to before in completely unique ways. For example, the photo with Lion's Head, people have seen hundreds of photos of that mountain before, but they've never seen it in the way I'm hopefully showing it to them with the Milky Way and the fog and things like that. For me, my challenge is to try and show maybe commonplace or iconic places that people might know about in a unique way and just catch their eye and say, "Oh, I've never seen that place like this before," and that hopefully will catch their attention. And for me, that's the challenge, is to try and do that.
And why landscape photography? Is there a reason? Because normally photographers I would think, gravitate towards wildlife in South Africa. But why landscape? Was there a particular reason that you sort
Yeah,
of?
so that's a good question. So definitely not anything else, not weddings or portraits. That is my worst. I often get asked by people, "Oh, don't you want to shoot my wedding?" Or take, and I'm like, I couldn't think of anything worse to do. It's just I'm not passionate about taking pictures of people at all. If they want me to take pictures, I'll use my cell phone. That's where I am at, and that's an important question because I've been asked it quite a few times. And for me, I think at the end of the day, what I've boiled it down to is it's the thrill of the hunt in the Western Cape. We don't have a lot of wildlife here, even though you would think we're in Africa. So most of the wildlife's more north, up by Kruger National Park, up that side, which is about a 20-hour drive from where I live. So it's not something I have accessible to me. But what I do have accessible to me is I've got 30 minutes away from the beach. I'm 30 minutes away from the mountains. I'm 30 minutes away from the winelands, from the farmlands. Landscapes are all around me, and Cape Town often gets voted as one of the most beautiful places in the world, and it is. So it's easy for me to go out and look and say, "Oh, there's going to be a beautiful sunset," and go take pictures of it. So it's that pursuit of trying to get those beautiful photos of the landscape, which is also what I enjoy about the wildlife stuff. So if you look at my feed, I do some wildlife stuff, but I try and combine the landscape with the wildlife. For me, that's something that's unique, and it's that challenge of trying to push that bar to the next level that I love about photography.
Yeah, yeah. I think the best shot that I like it's combining your landscape and your wildlife is the shot of the two giraffe framed by the full moon. It's quite spectacular.
Oh,
How did they
yes.
pull that off?
So that's done really well for me recently. So that I actually took when it was there in May. End of May, I was up there on a trip, up there for 10 days. And yeah, we were planning to shoot the full moon rising over some trees on the sand dune. And while we were waiting, the giraffe walked up onto the dune. And it was
Wow.
one of those instances when it all aligned and you ran and you got everything aligned and you started taking the pictures and you knew you had the picture on the camera that you were like, I've got the shots. It was
Yeah.
one of those euphoric moments where you were like, this is it. I've done something that I've been wanting to achieve. And people say it's lucky, and it is. It's definitely a large luck element, but there's also a very large planning element and making sure you putting yourself in those opportunities to potentially get something like that. And that's the thing about Africa and the bush and the wilderness. You just don't know what you're going to get. And that's what I love about it.
Awesome, awesome. And this another, I think of this same sand dunes, and there's this lone oryx walking. That's spectacular. It just showcases just the vastness of the space.
Yes, yes. So that's a bit further up. So that's at Sossusvlei, where the dunes, and the oryx or the gemsbok often walk up on the dunes to get over, and it's basically positioning yourself and then just waiting for them to be in the right place and the right time. But it gives a real scale of the desolation of the desert, combining the wildlife with the dunes and the sand, which I think wouldn't be portrayed without the animal in the image.
Right. And the other like about your feed is it's it looks very natural. You know what I mean? It doesn't look over processed because you want to do fine art. You try to interpret it in a certain way. I don't think there's anything wrong with it because it's each artist's way of looking at their photography. But it's very natural. It's almost I feel like almost I'm there kind of a feel I get from looking at your photographs. Is that a conscious thing that you do?
Yeah, so for me, I'm consciously try and pick out very clean scenes and very minimal scenes. But for me, the main element is trying to capture the thing I was going to capture. So, for example, if there was the fog or the Milky Way or whatever, the lightning or the storms, I want that to be the focus of the element, not just the fact that it's a pretty picture. Because if I don't have that, then there's no difference between me just taking a picture in the middle of the day and then post processing it to look like something I want it to look like. So I try and keep it as natural as possible and try and focus on going out and making sure the environment and the lighting and the conditions are correct to portray the kind of imagery I want to show. And if I don't have that, then I lose a lot of the reason why I go out. So for me, that is a very big element in my photography to try and portray what I actually saw and enhance those elements that I was seeing.
And how did you get to this sort of outlook? Were there any influences in your photography that you early in your career that sort of led you into this path?
So I have a lot of photography friends that I go out and take pictures with, and it's you push each other as well to go out and challenge each other. And I will say I'm not as I wouldn't say naive, but and as risky as I used to be. I remember early days we used to spend all night out taking pictures of the Milky Way and stay up the whole night and only come back at 4 the next morning. I'm a bit more conscious of my planning now, and I think I spend a bit more time fine tuning my shots before I do them. So for me, I enjoy the planning part quite a lot. So I do a lot of planning. You can see with the astrophotography and things like that. It's a lot of weather watching as well and understanding how the weather behaves for the areas that I'm going to. So all of that comes, full circle into what I enjoy about going and taking the picture and taking the pictures almost just the reward at the end of the day. And the more times you don't get the image, the more it challenges me to want to get it. You'll see sometimes I'll post a picture and say, I've been waiting 5 years for this picture and now I finally got it. And that I love. I absolutely love that. If it was easy, anyone could go out and take the picture. And I don't want to take photos that anyone else could just go and take. And that really drives me. I think it's my competitive nature that that is also a lot of my drive for what I want to do and get to that point. It's also pushing your own standards. I want to look back to what I photographed last year and say, I've improved this year and I've pushed my bar higher. So it's harder to get the images, but I'm still managing to get them and pushing that bar, continually pushing it higher and higher.
Okay. Is that your PhD training coming into play?
I think the planning and that comes from that quite a lot. I will say, being in the field I wasn't in science, in cardiovascular research, you were prepared for a lot of failure, and a lot of times you would do projects and they wouldn't work, and that's just the nature of science. So I definitely think that's conditioned me for a lot of the challenges that I have now. You just can't let it get you down. You just got to keep going at it and trying to achieve that vision you have. I find that as time goes by, I've become a lot better at visualizing or having a vision. So thinking about shots where you might get inspiration from other photographers, or you go to a place and you say, if these conditions all align, this could be the next photo that I want to. You start looking at the weather and conditions and making sure when they align that you are ready to go to those places to attempt to get the photos. And that's what I love about it.
Tell me something. When you started your academic career as a scientist, did you ever think that your career will pan out this way?
Not at all. No, not at all. It wasn't until I moved to Cape Town for the job I used to do that I actually first picked up a camera. It was a friend of mine who's a wedding photographer. He said, do you want to come take some pictures at this abandoned water park? And I'm like, that sounds interesting. So he lent me an old camera and we went and we took pictures, and it was the bug bits, and I bought my first camera. And ever since, I've been up in the morning. I often say to people, I left my 9 to 5 to work 24/7 now. A lot of the job is up in the middle of the night. But for me, what kind of gives me validation in what I'm doing is I used to struggle to get up to be at work at 9 a.m. in the morning at my old job. And I have no problem now getting up at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. to hike up the mountain. So until that changes, I think I'm doing the right thing and pursuing the right path.
Right now, as a landscape photographer, is your main job running workshops, or you sell prints as well? How does it work?
Yeah, so look, being a landscape photographer, it's not as clean cut. You want lots of eggs in different baskets. That's my approach to it anyway. The large majority of my income comes from running workshops. So I run about 12 or 13 workshops a year. I have a partner, another photographer, and we run the workshops together around Southern Africa, and we do Namibia, Lesotho, Botswana, Kubu Island, Cedarburg. Yeah. So yeah, we do trips all around Southern Africa. And then I also do a lot of private trips. So if I have private clients that want me to take them to certain areas, I'll do that. And I enjoy that as well because we can tailor make the trips to your desires and where you want to go. And then I do a lot of teaching. So I think that comes from my academic background. I really enjoyed teaching. So I do a lot of online classes. I do a lot of one-on-one sessions with people. So that keeps me quite busy doing the teaching. And then I do print sales. I try and focus on corporate stuff. So I do like boardrooms and reception areas and that type of areas. So that's why I'll shoot a lot of local content, because particularly in Cape Town area, Table Mountain and Lions Head is quite popular for that type of printing. So it all keeps me busy, and it all slowly trickles in some money so that I can pay my kids' school fees. Really, at the moment, that's where we're at. So.
Because landscape photography is a pretty tough business to be in. At least wedding or portrait, you'll have regular income coming in the form of events and stuff like that. But being a landscape photographer, I would imagine it's a tough gig. You need to be really good at your job, and we have a varied sort of revenue streams if you want to survive, I guess.
Yeah, it's a lot tougher because also there's no standardization really. So, in weddings and portraits and stuff, everyone knows like what's a fairish price or a standard price. And what I'm doing, you got guys that are well known and they charge crazy amount of money, and you got guys just starting out that are like charging nothing and working for free. So it's really tough. I find for that stuff, For me personally, what I had to do in the beginning was sell the location. So people came because of the location. And now I'm mainly transitioned into selling myself. So people come because they want to come with me and they trust me that I'm going to take them to good spots based on my images and that. Yeah, doing podcasts and stuff like this for me is great because it breaks down that you're just a person on a screen, and it just gives people that personal connection and they can
Right.
see who you are as a person. And that's really what I'm trying to be pushing for the last 2 years is trying to sell myself, and hopefully people want to come and join me, and I'll take you to great places and we'll take great photos.
True. And break it down your workshop for me in the sense that what is it that I can get out of it if I come on a workshop with you?
Yeah. So I do workshops and tours, and they're quite different from each other. So a tour will be where we're going, like across Namibia to lots of different places. And that will be we going specifically to take good photos at those locations. So on a tour, I would have the expectation that you're pretty competent in your gear, you know what you're shooting, and you coming to get good photos at the locations, and you want me to take you to the best spots with the best lights because you know that I know the area. The workshop side, which I enjoy quite a lot, and has a large teaching element. So we do a lot of like seascapes, astrophotography workshops, landscape compositions, things like that. Also do wildlife workshops. So the understanding is, even though you could be very proficient, and I get a lot of professional photographers that come on trips with me, they might do weddings or other types of photography. So they understand their cameras, they still want to learn how to do long exposures for seascapes, or what are the best settings or techniques for doing astrophotography. So on those type of workshops, there's a large learning element. There'll be talks on the best settings, composition, approaches to taking images, and then we'll do editing as well. So once you've taken the images, we'll show you techniques and tricks in that to post-process the different types of images. Yeah, so there's definitely a very large learning aspect on it. And it's a lot of fun to come and shoot with other photographers. A lot of guys might be very proficient at photography, but it's not the same when you're with family or friends that aren't into photography. So a lot of them come because it's a nice community. You're meeting like-minded people, and you get to discuss photography. And many people have become friends. I think something that distinguishes the workshops I'm trying to do, and what you see when you look up at photography workshops, is we have about an 80% repeat client list. So if you've come on a workshop with me, about 80% of people that have come on a workshop will come on another workshop with me again. So it's not like we're just trying to get people in one time, we line you up, take a photo. We really try and build that community, build those relationships, and teach you things you didn't know. And hopefully that means you'll come again and enjoy it. And I've got people that have been coming with me for 5, 6 years, and they absolutely love it.
Awesome. That sounds absolutely amazing. And what's the best time to come on a tour or a workshop in your neck of the woods? And in your point, what's the best top 5 or top 10 spots that you really love?
Yeah, so in Southern Africa, we have two main seasons. It's our spring and autumn. So it'll be end of February to middle of May, and then again from August to October, our best times for landscape and astrophotography. Yeah. We get a lot of people coming, getting a lot of internationals coming, particularly for the astrophotography, because our skies here in the southern hemisphere are absolutely amazing. We have dark skies, particularly here in Africa, and compared to the northern hemisphere, we have no cloud, dark skies. So we get a lot of guys coming for the astrophotography. I think of all the trips we do, I do probably 6 astrophotography orientated workshops. I've got one coming up in August now where we're going to Kubu Island in Botswana. And if you don't know, that's those giant baobabs in the middle of the salt pans, and we're going to
Right,
go
right.
shoot the Milky Way there. So for me, I love astrophotography. I think you can see that from my feed. It's quite prominent in there. Every new moon, I'm out in the middle of the night shooting astrophotography. There's something just so special about being out in the dark alone with no one else around and seeing the stars moving above your head. So for me, those are kind of my favorite workshops, going doing the astrophotography. Yeah, I love all the trips. They're so different. So that's something we also try and do is try and make every trip unique to a certain thing so they're not the same. So if we're doing like our Clarence, which is like autumn colors where you have the yellows and the reds and the greens, really focusing on composition, abstract images, completely different to shooting our seascapes where we're standing knee deep in water with our camera gear and taking long exposure with filters. So each workshop's so different that we really don't get bored doing any of them. Even when we go to the same places again, it's just new conditions that you're finding. And a lot of guys come on the same workshops again and again, and they just get new content. So it's tough to choose.
But the looks like the Lion Mountain is one of your top favorites.
We don't actually do a workshop there because it's in town. So that I go a lot on my own, or I'll do private sessions with clients, and we'll go up and do that. But yeah, it's a place I don't do it that often, but maybe 6 or 7 times a year, which I suppose does sound like a lot, but it's just close to home for me. So I enjoy going there and being above. And the fog is something that the photographers get quite excited here about in Cape Town. So whenever there's fog coming in, we up the mountain.
And what next for you, Kyle? After this, like, how's your photography evolving? What is in the future for you?
Yeah, so basically it's going a bit bigger, trying to do some different workshops. Next year, we're going to retire a few of the workshops we've been doing for a long time and try and focus on going to new places. So I can't divulge too much about it. But yeah, for me, it's really staying in Southern Africa. That's the focus I want to do. I don't foresee myself being one of those guys that are going to Iceland and then Patagonia and then all across the world. I think for me, Southern Africa is big enough and there's enough to do here that it'll keep me busy all year round. I do want to do a little bit more wildlife stuff. I think is quite popular, and a lot of the guys who come on the landscape trips with me also interested in wildlife. So it's just a natural step for me to do a few more wildlife workshops or combine them with the landscapes as well. That's something I want to get a little bit more into. And I think if you look at my social media feed, you can see I'm slowly mixing in a little bit more wildlife into that, but still trying to present it in a kind of new spin, unique way.
And close off this chat for a beginner landscape photographer who wants to go out into the wilds of Africa to take some shots, what will be your best advice? How do you start off?
It's going to feed right into what I do, but honestly, the best advice I can ever give someone who's starting out in photography or who's been doing a little bit and is found they're getting a bit stuck or hitting a wall is to go on a workshop. It doesn't have to be with me; it can be with anyone. But going on a workshop, you just learn so much that you can't learn on YouTube. A lot of the problem with YouTube is you don't know what questions to ask in the beginning. So once you know the questions, you can look it up and there's information everywhere on how to do it. But a lot of times you don't realize what you don't know, right? So going on the workshop just really shows you where you are and at what level you're at. And I see it all the time, like when guys come in a workshop one year and they come again the next year or later on in the year. And I can just see a massive improvement in the quality of their work that they're putting out. And it's because it gets them excited. It shows you techniques where you might be lacking, and your learning curve just goes way up exponentially going on workshops. So it does cost money, but it's, to me, that is the most valuable thing you could do as a photographer is go out on a workshop in an area that field that you're interested in and be with other people that are doing what you're doing. And it actually shows you where you're standing in your own genre and compared to other people that are doing something similar. And it pushes you to hopefully improve your skill level.
Awesome. I think that's really great advice. And where can we find you in register or book one of your workshops or tours?
Yeah, so the best place to find what I'm doing currently is basically on my website, which is just my name, kylegoetsch.com. For the tours I do in Southern Africa that are pre-scheduled for the following years, I work under Venture KJ. So Venture KJ, and my partner's name's John, so it's Venture with Kyle and John. You can see all our workshops there, pricing, what we're getting up to. But the best way is to follow me on social media, either on Facebook or Instagram. So it'll just be Kyle Goetsch Photography. And there I post on my stories nearly daily. You can see behind the scenes what I'm getting up to and what I've got planned for the future.
Awesome. That sounds great. And thanks, Kyle, for coming on the podcast. Absolute pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great chatting.
Awesome. Awesome. Incidentally, you're my first photographer from Africa.
Oh, no, there are many great photographers from Africa. My pet peeve is when we get internationals coming to Africa taking better African photos than people who live in Africa. So I'm always like, we need to up our game here in Africa so that we can have the best photos from our area.
Thank you, Kyle, for coming on the show. It was fascinating to hear your story, and many thanks for sharing it with us. Make sure to follow him online. I will put all the links in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning in to this enriching episode of Photo Country. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review for our podcast. Your support helps us bring you more incredible stories from photographers around the world. Until next time, keep capturing those beautiful moments. Goodbye. This is Rajeev signing off.